The direct means to eternal bliss. Chapter 1. The Imposter. The following definitions are only for the purpose of the teachings in this book. These are the definitions of the words ego, self, and thought that will be used in this book. Thought. Thoughts are the words of your language in your mind. If your native language is English and you write in English and speak in English, those same English words in your mind are thoughts. Some people may speak, write, and think in more than one language. Ego. Ego is the thought I. The ego is the I thought. I am happy. I am sad. I did this. I did that. There are so many sentences in thought that contain the word I. That thought I in each of those sentences is the ego. The ego is the idea of a separate individual identity. The ego identifies with the body and with thought and calls the body and thought I. The ego is thought. The ego is thinking. Other words for the ego, as the word is being used in this book, are imposter, imposter self, human mind, false self, false identity. There is far more to what the ego is than just thought. All that a human perceives is a part of the ego dream. However, for the purposes of this book, the focus is on the ego as thought. Self. The self with a capital S is infinite, eternal awareness, love, bliss. Those are 5 words pointing towards one awareness. Awareness, love, bliss are not 3, they are 1. The self is the background of awareness. Because almost all humans are in the habit of looking outward towards thoughts, the body, the world, people, places, things, etc., it appears as though the background of awareness, the self, wakes up in the morning and goes to sleep at night. If you turn your attention towards the background of awareness, eventually you will discover the background of awareness is continuous. Because almost all humans are in the habit of looking outward towards thoughts, the body, the world, people, places, things, etc., it appears as though the background of awareness is limited. If you turn your attention towards the awareness that wakes up in the morning instead of towards people, places, things, thoughts, etc., eventually you will discover that awareness is infinite, eternal awareness, love, bliss. The background of awareness that appears to wake up in the morning is there during all the waking hours until one goes to sleep at night. Thoughts come and go, but the background of awareness that is aware of the thoughts is there during all the waking hours and does not come and go. The background of awareness is the true self. Technically, one can say that the true self is the infinite awareness and your background of awareness is the doorway to that infinite awareness. Before you learned the language you now think in, the background of awareness was there. Then you learned the word I in your language. Your body was given a name, and when people saw that body, they said, "There goes John," or Frank, or Jane, or Julie, or Kumar, or Radha, or whatever name they gave your body. Thus the idea arose, I am John, I am this body. You existed as the background of awareness before that I thought arose. The thought calling itself I is an imposter self. The background of awareness is the true self. The fact that you existed before you learned the language that became your thoughts helps to reveal the difference between your true self and the imposter. Because you existed as the background of awareness before you learned the language that produced the thoughts you now think in, you can easily see that the thought I is an imposter. All thoughts are opposed to your true nature. You know that thoughts are not part of your true nature because you had to learn them. That is why you cannot speak, write, and think fluently in 200 different languages, because you have not acquired those languages. You can observe the same process in an infant. You can see that an infant is aware before it learns any language. You can observe the child growing older and learning a language. You can observe when the child learns the word I, and when the child begins to say the word I. Being able to see how the imposter arose in you, and how the imposter arises in every human infant and child is a very important tool. The reason it is a very important tool is you do not have to rely upon someone else to tell you that the ego is an acquired imposter. You can observe this for yourself. Thought is something foreign, alien to the true self. Thought pretends to be the self. Thought is not the self. Thought is an imposter. Thought believes thought is a real entity, and thought believes thought is a real self. Thought is not a real entity, and thought is not a self. Living from thought instead of living from awareness is the cause of all human suffering. The imposter, thought ego, is the cause of all human problems, sorrow, and suffering. The background of awareness is the true self. The awareness that appears to wake up in the morning is the true self. The awareness that appears to be looking through your eyes now is the true self. As an example for clarification, you could view thinking and memory as something like a computer program. Within that computer program is a virus. The virus is called the I thought. The virus controls the program. The I thought controls all thinking. The virus pretends to be yourself. The I thought pretends to be yourself. The virus creates tremendous sorrow and suffering. The I thought creates tremendous sorrow and suffering. None of the sorrow or suffering is needed. What is needed is to delete the virus that pretends to be yourself. What is needed is to delete the imposter self. When one attempts to delete the virus sends out many thoughts claiming that deleting the virus is not a good idea. The virus has many strategies to preserve the illusion that it is real and to continue the delusion that it is the real self. In humans, the program that came from the outside and took control of their awareness is called thought, language, and thinking. In humans, the virus is called the ego or the I thought. The I thought ego is an imposter pretending to be the self. The ego is the cause of all human sorrow and suffering. The ego is the cause of all disease, death, war, fear, anger, and violence. Although many thousands of years have passed, human beings have made almost no inward progress toward ending sorrow, suffering, war, fear, anger, violence, cheating, and lying. Thousands of years ago, humans had sorrow, suffering, war, fear, anger, violence, cheating, and lying. Now, today, currently, humans have suffering, sorrow, fear, war, anger, violence, cheating, and lying. What has kept humans in the same pool of inward, unsolved problems? The ego, the imposter, has kept humans in the same pool of inward, unsolved problems. Inward problems cannot be solved by looking outward. Inward problems can only be solved by looking inward. The ego knows that if the attention is turned inward, the ego will be found to be a myth, an imposter, an illusion, a delusion, a dream. Therefore, due to the ego's fear of ending, the ego keeps the attention directed outward. Usually, when people attempt to turn the attention inward, they are still looking outward because they do not understand the meaning of looking inward. All humans are slaves, and the imposter self is their master. Exposing the strategies of that imposter self, how to put an end to those strategies, how to bring the imposter self to a final end, thus ending all sorrow and suffering, and remaining in the true self whose nature is infinite, eternal awareness, love, bliss, are the primary purposes of this book. Ending the ego does not end the body. After the ego ends, the body will live out the natural course of its life. One should never attempt to harm the body. The ego is the I thought. Ending the ego is ending the I thought. Ending the bodily life will not end the ego. The ego will create the dream of a new body when the old body ends. Thus, ending the body does not help solve the problems. Humans almost always have their attention directed outward towards thoughts, people, places, things, experiences, etc. The background of awareness is the true self, and humans almost always ignore it. Your true self deserves your attention. When humans turn their attention away from thoughts, the body, the world, people, places, things, experiences, etc., and towards their awareness, eventually they will directly experience their true self. The imposter thought pretending to be yourself and calling its pretend self I should not be tolerated even for one moment. Especially an imposter that has created so much suffering and sorrow should not be tolerated even for one moment. The imposter thought is like a parasite. Because the ego believes it is a real entity, the ego is afraid of ending. The ego controls all thinking. Because the ego is afraid of ending and controls all thinking, the ego directs thought in ways that will preserve its imaginary self, so that its imaginary self is not brought to an end. The purpose of the teachings in this book is to bring the imposter self to an end, so that what remains is only the true self, whose nature is infinite, eternal awareness, bliss, love. When the imposter ends, all suffering and sorrow also end. Imagining that thinking or thought is yourself is a delusion, a dreamlike illusion. Thinking that you are a body living in a world is a delusion, a dreamlike illusion. Thought has created those delusions. All sorrow, suffering, and delusions have one single root. The single root is thought. The root of thought is the I thought. The root of thought is the thought I. Thought is not part of your true nature. Thought is something you learned. Do not allow something you acquired to pretend to be yourself. Try this experiment. Set aside 2 hours when you have no other activities going on. Sit down in a place where you will not be disturbed. Shut your eyes. Make a decision that for the next 2 hours you will not allow a single thought to arise. If you are really in control of thinking, then not even one thought will arise. If thinking controls you, then even though you have made the decision not to allow a single thought to arise, you will not be able to sit for 2 hours without a single thought arising. What a revelation this can be to discover that thought, something that you acquired, now controls you. Chapter 1 contains a description of the secret that has enslaved humanity for as long as there have been humans. Read chapter 1 very slowly 3 times before reading chapter 2. Some of the reasons for reading slowly and repetitively are that people read spiritual books and various self-improvement books, sometimes hundreds of them, without any major change occurring in their lives. One of the reasons for this is that they are not familiar enough with the teachings for the teachings to have become tools they can use. In other words, the teachings have not really sunk in after a single reading. By reading one chapter 3 times before going on to the next chapter, there is a much better chance of the teachings becoming a usable tool that can actually transform one's life. Since this book teaches what the ego would prefer to block out, this is even truer for this book. It is an interesting experience to present a teaching, have someone imagine something about what they have read, and then criticize the teaching based on what they imagined, which was not presented and which was not the teaching presented. End of chapter 1.